Ask anyone, and they will tell you that the Adirondacks is a place like no other. From the staggering peaks to the low-lying wetlands adorned with wildlife, there isn't much that this jaw-dropping park doesn't offer. The park is home to over 6 million acres of land and countless mountains, rivers, streams, and lakes. The Adirondacks has had a rich and varied history of settlers, war, trading, trapping, logging, you name it. After decades of clear-cutting and homesteading, the Adirondacks were deemed worthy enough to warrant protection from the state government in the late 1800s. From this point on, the land would become a patchwork of state lands and private lands, all of different designations. These different designations regulate the usage of the land and also give an idea of how that land came to be. For instance, wilderness lands have very little, if any, human impact, as they are meant to be pristine forest, whereas recreational lands are rife with trails, lean-tos, and boat landings. Both permanent residents and tourists abide by the rules of the park, enacting a careful balance that attempts to satisfy the oftentimes competing needs within the Adirondacks.
When the state opened up some formerly private land, it became available for kayaking, the Fulton Channel Lakes. That particular area is forever wild. Some people feel that changing that designation would make it more accessible, because currently it's drive in a long distance to a remote parking lot, get your boats off the car, then schlep them for a goodly distance. So if the designation was changed, it would be more accessible. They'd have parking that was a little closer to put-ins. So some people love the idea that it's forever wild, and other people say, well, what about us? We can't use it. It'd be interesting to see how they wrangle that problem.
In researching land acquisition, I spoke with Eric Kulisade, the New York State Parks Commissioner.
In your experience with acquiring private land for public consumption, what is that process like?
So that has been much of my career has been, before I came to parks, was spent doing land conservation, right? Doing land conservation projects, and worked for organizations that were, I would say, almost conservation brokers. I was at the Trust for Public Land, I was at the Open Space Institute, and those two organizations, unlike a lot of the land trusts that you hear about, which tend to own land long-term and get easements and have little preserves and things like that, TPL and OSI really are focused on transitioning private land into the public sector, so acting as brokers on conservation's behalf, really. And so that work is really totally dependent, by and large, on public funding. So you need to have an agency, and it can be the federal government, it can be the state government, it can be local government that is interested in seeing land protected from development, and that is willing to bring funds to bear. There are some ability, some organizations have got some kind of endowment to help buy land. OSI did have some, and Scenic Hudson has some of that, but even they are generally, those with real private funds to do this work are few and far between, so they're generally operating on behalf of, working in advance of government, trying to help government do it, because, the private sector, it does have a greater ability to hop in, to be versatile, to set things up, maybe even finance deals until the public funding can be brought to bear. There's a certain amount of process to make public funds available. There's appraisals, there's yearly budgets, and just some detail work for when the government is going to step in and do things. Adirondacks, clearly, almost anywhere in the Adirondacks is a place where you could justify putting public dollars. One of the biggest acquisitions of the last few years is the Finch Prine acquisition was monstrous, right? But that was I think it ended up probably being maybe $60 million in state funding over several years.
Which part of the park was that in, if you know?
It's kind of it was old. Finch Prine was a paper company, and it was their timberlands that they used to feed their paper mills, and I would say it was kind of spread out over. It was a lot of big chunks, in and around Speculator, in and around the Hudson River Gorge.
Oh, is that where the OK Slip parcel was?
Maybe.
Because I remember that was a logging area.
It could very well be. Is that a recent OK Slip? I recognize the name.
Years.
Yeah. So that might be. No, that was certainly Finch Prine was one of the biggest acquisitions that have been done.
It was then that I realized with excitement that we were speaking the same language. Because in fact, the OK Slip parcel on top of the Finch Prine lands was the very thing that got me interested in doing this project in the first place. The Adirondacks is unique in that it both sustains business and conservation efforts. The economy of the park is largely dependent on seasonal tourism, which directly ties into land use.
My name is Mary Fraiser. I'm the executive chef here at Timberlock. I've been here since 1990. And I work at Gore too. I'm the executive chef at Gore. And I've been there since 1997.
What's it like balancing between having the winter season and the summer season?
For me, I'm pretty lucky because I have the 2-season jobs and they actually come right together. I don't have much time on the end of either shoulder sides to do anything else in between. I used to do cooking for the rafting company in April and May, in between my season from Gore and here, but I don't do that anymore.
One company that has been particularly affected by private land acquisition is Square Eddy. The rafting and adventure company is based out of North Creek, and thanks to the recent acquisition of the Finch Prine parcel, they have been able to open up a unique hiking trip. From their own backyard that resides on state land, they hike out to OK Slip Falls, and then down to the Hudson River Gorge, where they meet up with rafts to continue the journey. These hike-in, raft-out trips are not only a physical experience, but a mental one. I joined Linc of Square Eddy on a trip recently and was treated with a slew of historical information about both the lands themselves and the industries that used to take advantage of them.
We're going to work our way upstream, and about halfway we're going to access the newly acquired state lands. We're going to be exploring a parcel that was acquired in 2013, 2,800 acre parcel that is OK Slip, and we're going to approach the gorge to the due north. So we'll work our way, get off to a nice quick start on a traverse, cover a little ground, hook up with the New York State Foot Trail at the 2-mile mark for another mile that takes us to OK Slip Falls, and then we'll drop down to the river. And this is where we're going to hook up with our boat. So we'll hook up with our friends that are rafting today about halfway, and then we'll be on the river about 8 miles for 9 rapids. Off to the right is due north. And this is a natural fault line. So our 3rd and 4th rapids today, we're going to go right through this pocket of terrain that's off to our right here, called the gun sight. It's gun sight in, gun sight out, right here. You can see that notch in the mountainside, and that'll be our 3rd and 4th rapid. So where we are here, the Hudson's 4 miles to the north, and then our closest road to the south is over on Route 8, which is part of the Siamese Ponds Wilderness area. so due south, Siamese Pond Wilderness area. And we're going to be exploring the Hudson River. We're going to work our way to the north, and we're going to be approaching some newly acquired state lands that was acquired by the state of New York in 2013. So pretty crazy concept to think, but prior to 2013, there were lands that haven't been walked freely for over 100 years. So they were owned by old logging company, Finch Prime. The Nature Conservancy came in and made a deal with Finch Prime to help preserve and protect. So that transaction happened, and it was owned by the Nature Conservancy. And the Nature Conservancy came in, preserved, protected until the state of New York was in a position to acquire. So that happened in 2013. And our approach, Casey Mountain, is 2,500 feet. New York State has a foot trail that's just on the west side of Casey Mountain. So we're going to approach it a little bit differently. So
What has it been like being a part of the Adirondack community, being a part of the natural landscape itself, working with that, etc.?
It's been truly over the top to experience 4 seasons to the extreme. Fortunately, we had a great winter this past winter. When we have spring, it's truly spring. When it's summer, it's full-on summer. Fall, leading into all 4 seasons. Having our own little parcel of land that abuts newly acquired state lands has been really over the top. We have these massive swaths of wilderness that we're trying to do our best to preserve and protect, and it's been great to have something like Square Eddy to try to help make the lands more accessible. As far as being a local, I feel very fortunate to be able to access the lands myself. But then with a small adventure company, it's been a good run, and to be a part of the land and the landscape has been it's hard to put it into words because it does speak to my spirit and natural highs. Thing of beauty. The property line there, and then this is you can see there's a stake in here, and so you can see that just means that we are traversing right along the southeast corner of the 2,800 acre parcel that is New York State lands. It's amazing to think, but this mine in its heyday had a payroll of 40. And what made this mining operation so unique is that they had a different style. So they were going into the earth opposed to strip mining, which is just starting at the top, working their way down. And we'll work our way. So this was all clear cut. So the Hudson was a working river. So you figure they were pushing logs down that river from 1850 to 1950. That was the last commercial log drive. And so it was a pretty young forest. So you figure the oldest tree, anything that was within distance of the Hudson was definitely cut. So a relatively young forest. You can see in the terrain, that's pretty much all man-made, even though there's a lot of natural terrain. Most of this is all tailings, all those extra stone from that mining operation. These piles right here, these are tailings. So this is kind of neat where a big part of our local history as we approach the gorge, Casey Mountain, very unique, north, south. On the top of Casey, going from west to east or left to right, there was an old mining industry, and they were mining garnet. So it's pretty cool. So the garnet is this dark red. Do we have any January birthdays in the house? No, January birthstone. And I love the diversity of this stone, but essentially,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's the garnet. The black rock that's surrounded is called hornblende. So what they used to do is they used to pull the garnet, extract the garnet away from the hornblende, and then this is a tailing. So they would take what they need, and then the tailing is just a secondary piece of rock that's left behind. A lot of times I exercise like a prize fighter, very small steps, every step's a big step, and I was like, whoa! So this is the main mine. You can see they were going into the earth there, You can see there's still some ice down there, some ice and snow down in a birder in this area where it's so heavily wooded. But you can see a lot of sign. This is a dead tree, and a lot of the woodpeckers, for instance, you can identify what bird might be around by the type of hole. You can see there's round ones, oval ones. There's a maple, a little bit of everything. You can see the textured tree, the super textured tree is a cherry. So a little bit of everything as far as species. Little quartz in the earth. And oh yeah, you can see some white just over on the left. Welcome to OK Slip Falls. There's different classifications of land all throughout the park. The parcel that we've been focused on is designated wilderness, so we abide by the rules and regulations of a wilderness area. So as a small adventure company, operating paddle boats, generating our own power, staying in the current, truly being ambassadors to the land has been tremendous. With the acquisition of the lands that surround the Hudson River Gorge, it's been great. We have a similar approach where we're trying to make the lands more accessible, and being that we have the ability to raft the Hudson commercially, it's been nice to tie in the walking aspect of it. Hey Larry P. So I lost my chain of thought there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Phoebe,
Hello, my name is Linc Marsack.
Thank you.
owner, guide, Square Eddy Expeditions.
Dax, what has been your experience being a guide, being a citizen up here, etc.?
Well, I'm from here. I grew up rafting on the Hudson River right from the time I was a teenager. So I became a guide when I was 18, and now it's 34 years later. Yeah. So yeah, it's excellent. It's totally excellent experience. Such a beautiful place. Like, there's no river like this river for me. It's really shaped my life. I've done what I wanted to do my whole adult life. So, and then especially getting Square Eddy, having the business. You know, it's seasonal, so the season comes in and it's go time, and it just makes it fun. Like, summer is fun. You have your own company, you have your stresses that go with it, but most of all, we're in the fun business. That's what it's all about when it comes to rafting.
While seeking out different viewpoints for this project, my travels brought me to Timberlock, a rustic resort on the shores of Indian Lake.
What is the designation of the land that you're currently, that the camp is on? Is it,
This is a private piece of land within the Adirondack Park, surrounded by wild forest and pretty much on all our borders, wild forest and then wilderness on the other side of the lake. But this piece of land is an interesting story in that it was more or less homesteaded back in the 1800s. And later, early 1900s, when the state New York State, realized that there was quite a bit of value in the Adirondacks, they started challenging deeds. And the fellow Farrington who had a deed to this he only had a quitclaim deed, which is not a sort of a formal legal deed, as a warranty deed would be. So they could have taken away the entire property and kicked him out. But the judge, he'd been here 40 years, and the judge awarded him half of his original. It used to go from the brook down here, Forks Brook, all the way to the cove. That was his original homestead or quitclaim. So they gave him half of that, and then it was a legal warranty deed which he could sell, and he sold that to the Gavets, and then we bought that from the Gavets. They retained a small section at the end of 5 acres or 7 acres at the end of the camp, where the greenhouse is there, the Gavet house. But it's private land, and we could develop it as we want. We have to go through the local code enforcement officer. If we want to build a cabin like that, I have to send him plans and get a permit approved. We can't just do anything we want. If we wanted to, say, build a hotel or condominiums or a big project, big major land change, we would have to go before the Adirondack Park Agency. And it would be a much more involved 2-year process. But we could do that if we wanted to. Yeah, I know you cringe and I cringe. I wouldn't, have no intention. But if you own private land, that you can, as long as you follow the rules.
What do you love most about the Adirondacks?
I love the wildness. It's an amazing area that is so close to major populations with New York and Vermont and upstate New York, and you can't get much wilder properties or areas. You can go this way to the east, the southeast, for 30-something miles across wilderness. You're not going to see anybody in there. So it's pretty unusual to have a chunk of land like this where it is in the northeast of the U.S. And it's an interesting experiment with protected lands and private lands, which is still evolving, working out those relationships. And I don't think there's anything quite like it in the States that I know of.
How do you think that intersection between private and public lands has affected the economy around here? Whether through tourism or otherwise?
It's always been a tough area economically. It's always been a tourist area. It's that far removed, and the weather is tough. Winters are long. The protected lands bring a lot of tourists up to experience that, but they don't stay. They're just here for short periods of time, and some areas have been able to maximize that traffic better than others. But it is a struggle. It's a hard living up in this area. We've managed pretty well by sort of, filling the place up and having people, our staff, come in just before we open up and trying to minimize some of those costs and things. But we're seasonal. We're 12 weeks of season, which is pretty short. If you wanted to live up here and make a living, it'd be pretty tough.
Seeing the camp empty before the season starts, with the tall mountains and wilderness surrounding it on all sides, it's easy to see just how hard it can be to make a living and to make your life up here. However, as always, the people up here persevere. And for many and all who come here, the Adirondacks remain a sanctuary for people, plant, and animal alike.
My name's Holly.
How long have you been up here in the Adirondacks? What do you do up here?
I have actually been here all my life. I came up as a little girl up to Saranac Lake to a summer place, and then as we just vacationed there when I was young, and I came here to Timberlock and I've been here for about, gosh, I would say 25, 30 years.
Wow. So,
And the black flies are biting, as usual.
so most important question: what are the importance of black flies to you? I'm just kidding. So, what do you do here at Timberlock?
At Timberlock, we have a place for a guest to come experience the Adirondacks. They get to get away from the city and explore nature.
Do you think it's really important that folks have that opportunity?
I do. And there are people that even though they live in Pennsylvania or Connecticut or places where they can have woods and things around them, it's not quite the same as the Adirondacks because there's so much wild property here. There's so many, right from where we are on Indian Lake, there's a huge lack of private land, so you don't see any houses. And it just is a different perspective on your life if you're out somewhere and you're not surrounded by sort of more, not civilization, but more built-up civilization, I should say. Because people know that there are people around. You're never in a place where there's no one around for many, many miles, but it feels that way, always. Yeah.
And so now I'm going to ask you the cheesy question. Two cheesy questions. What do you like most about the Adirondacks?
I love swimming in the lakes. They're just the best swimming anywhere. And I do love being able to look at the mountains in all the different weather patterns, the different light. It's very restful and restorative, I would say. Being able to look across the lake, look at the mountains, is just a really great thing for your soul.
My life and so many others flows through the Adirondacks in a truly special way. And it is those days when my shadow matches those of the spruce and the maples that I feel truly at peace here. When I look out across this vast wilderness, with both its parts tamed and truly wild, I see hope for both its future and our future. I asked people I met in the park to explain to me what the mantra "Forever Wild" means to them. I've been asking everybody this. What does Forever Wild mean to you?
I have one more question for you. You ready?
I don't know.
Either just on a policy level or an emotional level, what does the phrase "Forever Wild" mean to you?
Forever Wild, my knowledge about that is that it was established in 1885 when the state established the Forest Commission and strengthened further in 1892, 1894 with a constitutional amendment. It pertains to the state's forest preserve to protect it from damage, except in the conditions allowed by amendments to the state's constitution.
Well, Forever Wild means to me that we have an opportunity, if we live here, to not have something commercialized, to not have it degraded. We know how important the forest is to our physical, emotional, and cognitive health, actually. And for someone to guarantee that no one, through commercial use or personal gain, is going to take that away from us is really, really important to me.
Forever Wild to me, leave no trace. Really do my best to preserve and protect, enjoy, but at the same time making sure that future generations have the same opportunities that we have living in the moment today.
Yeah, Forever Wild is no development on the whole river now because the state owns the whole trip that we do, the 17 miles or the hike in, wrapped out, no more development except for trails, and that's what we want. We want trails and we want woods, and we want to be surrounded by that natural habitat.
It's an extraordinary vision by the people that first proposed proposed it to protect a large portion of the Northeast and the Great North Woods. It certainly has some limitations, but in that, if certain uses that might make sense are harder to do because of it, but it's in general, I think it's a good thing, a pretty unusual thing.
Freedom is going to be here for us to enjoy, it's for us to use, hunting, fishing, camping, and enjoying nature.
Forever Wild, well, it's having a lot of wild land and people and beautiful waters and interesting people all the time, and it's a great place to be.
So Forever Wild means that there are pieces of property that will remain as they are for as long as there are people governing the earth. And I think it's a wonderful thing because even though there are many parts of the world where people don't have enough room for housing and things, we do honestly need to leave some pieces of property that are just as they are, not invaded by humans besides an airplane flying over, or I guess a drone these days. But I think there needs to be places that just are left alone to be as they were, how the earth was created. And it's something that even I think that's good to have for people to look at.
What was heartening after speaking with so many individuals from the park was that everyone had such a similar mindset that we must protect and preserve this wilderness no matter what. In the end, we are continually learning how to strike this balance between public consumption, private land use, and the overall good of the park. And now, more than ever, we have a responsibility to continue to maintain this balance.